We were just offering our sympathy to Mayor Campbell with the tragic situation he's had with the attack on his shop. He was just telling me that he's been in that business for 46 years and is the longest standing retailer in Kawerau. So it's a huge blow for him. So just our collective condolences to you, Malcolm. It's a tough thing that you're working through, as well as the good job you're doing as being Mayor of Kawerau. So yeah, just know that our hearts are with you. Just to note, yes, we are being recorded, so it will be available, and including all the presentations will be available after the meeting. So just keep that in mind, please. We do have an apology from Chief Executive Fiona McTavish, but I think she is being replaced by Sarah Umanzin from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. I am aware that Mayor Webber has to leave at about 11:30 to go to another commitment. So can I have somebody move that we accept those apologies? Moved Councillor Riestra, Mayor Riestra, and seconded Mayor Webber. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Contrary, carry. Do we have any late items for the agenda? No, that's okay. I'm just assuming that what we will do is, if people wanted to make a comment, we'll put up the hand from the reactions, and that also helps give me an order of how people want to speak as well. So can you we'll use that one to indicate to me as chair if you do want to speak on any matter. We'll now move to moving the minutes. That's the minutes from pages 6 to 14 in our agenda from the 18th of June. Is anybody happy to move those? Yep, Mayor Chadwick, do you want to speak to it, do you? Oh, she's just happy to move it.
Just moved.
Just moved. Okay, good. Can I have a seconder, please? Weber, is that okay? All those in favour? All those in favour, please say aye. Raise your hand. Contrary, carry. Now we move to the presentations. We've had the first one's been withdrawn and deferred to a future meeting, which was the challenges and opportunities of Papakāinga housing. So we'll have that in a future meeting. So we're going to now start with the presentation from Kāinga Ora, Amos and Kahurangi. So can I welcome them to the meeting and invite them to make their presentation to us.
Kia ora tātou. Kia ora koutou. My name's Amos Kamo. I'm from Kāinga Ora. Not sure if my colleague Kahurangi is online yet. He may be in a waiting room. Kahu, if you're with us, can you?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Great. Kahu's here. Cool. And Stacey here also will be joining us soon. She's here as well. Stacey's here. Great. Excellent. Okay. Can I ask Sabina, can you share the presentation I sent through last night?
Through the chair, I haven't shared it yet because I often experience last minute changes. So I will distribute after the meeting, if you're comfortable with that.
Is that okay to do that, get it afterwards, or does that mark up your presentation?
Oh, I was hoping someone could screen share. Part of the problem I've got working from home in Auckland is I can't get an image of my phone.
I can do it from here. Just give me a moment and I will open it for you.
Okay, look, just while you're doing that, I might just start with open up with a mihi. Kia te pai. Kia pai. Kia ora tātou. Me kira e te tuatahi, hei tuku mihi kia koutou. Koutou ko hui hui mai tātou I tēnei ata. Ki te kaiwhakahaere, nau hi whakawātia tātou nei hui hui ngai tēnei ata ki te mihi. Ki te mihi anō mo tutono ki a tātou nei o Kāinga Ora, ko tai mai I tēnei ata, hei whakātu I a koutou, na pukinga pērā ki ngā mahi, ki te taha o ngā iwi ruapu Māori, motu nei, pērā ki te whai kāinga, ki te whakatika whenua anō hoki. Kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Ko wai quote, koe mos kamo tuku ingoa, huri tēnei o ngā iwi o Ngaitahu, o Ngāti Mutunga, kei wharekauri tainua kia tiatia wa taranaki whānui mō nā momo wāhi o te motunei kei te mihi. Huri noa ki te reo Pākehā mō te maramatanga o te katoa. Good morning. My name is Amos Kamo. I am the Director of Policy and Performance at Kāinga Ora within Te Kurutau Group Operations Māori. I'm joined this morning by two of my colleagues, Kahurangi Tapsell and Stacey Beer. I'm going to hand over to them to introduce themselves. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Kahurangi Tapsell aho, ko Ngāti Pūkenga, ko Ngāti Whakauē oku iwi. No Maketu aho, kei Tauranga aho e noho ana. I'm Kahurangi Tapsell. I'm the Whenua Māori Development Team Lead within Te Kurutau at Kāinga Ora. And yeah, I'm based here in the Bay of Plenty in Tauranga. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, ko Stacey Beer toka ingoa. I am the Commercial Director of Whenua Partnerships for Kāinga Ora.
Ka pai. Thanks, Kahu. Thanks, Stacey. Could have been a bit of mine. Not sure if that's affecting you.
Yeah, there's a little bit of feedback there.
Okay, is that just me? Okay,
it's
stopped. Great.
Can you all make sure you... out.
Kia ora. I think the echo's still there.
Can people please make sure they're on mute?
Okay, I might try again. Good work. So, mine stands that we're filling in for Aaron Toy this morning. The focus of our presentation is on the role and function of order, specifically our partnership arrangements with iwi Māori across the country. Can I just get a sense, is this still echoing the program?
Just stop the share for a moment to see if I can make it better. So there's no echo now when the share is off?
Okay, yeah, you're right. It's just when it's sharing.
Okay, I will just try something else. Just give me a moment. I will avoid sharing sound. Just one moment, please. Try now.
Okay. All right, great. It was really distracting. That's much better. Yeah, hey, so look, thanks for the opportunity to present this morning. Our understanding the focus of this morning's presentation was what we're doing in terms of partnership with iwi Rōpū Māori across the country, but some focus around this region, Bay of Plenty. So we thought we'd do a bit of a joint presentation between myself, Kahurangi, and Stacey. As previously mentioned, we work within the side of Te Kurutau Group Operations Māori. We're technicians in our own right. I have a planning background as an environmental planner previously, as does Kahu, and Stacey comes from the private banking or commercial sector and the banking sector in particular, but works with us in Te Kurutau. So the focus of this presentation is very much what we're doing across the country, how the Mahi Partnership Program works in terms of the allocation of government announced funding this year. Let's see, $730 million, how that's going to be distributed across the country and how that's going to be allocated within the Bay of Plenty region in particular. So I'll start with a bit of background on that. So if we can move to the next slide, please.
Okay, it's just frozen. Just give me a minute. Sorry,
Yeah,
technology is not my friend.
No, that's okay. Look, just while you're doing that, the next slide just really had a quick presentation on our legacy organisations. But most of you, I think you will know, Tauranga Order was established in 2019 under our legislation, and essentially it brings together the people and capabilities and resources of three key legacy organisations, which are Housing New Zealand, HLC, and its previous subsidiary, Hobson Land Company. This was designed to enable a more cohesive and joined up approach to delivering the government's priorities for housing and urban development in New Zealand. These priorities were to address homelessness and making houses more affordable for New Zealanders. And our two key roles have been operating as a world-class public housing landlord, and also partnering with the development community, particular Māori local government, and others on urban development projects across New Zealand. Next slide, please. So our vision is building better, brighter homes, communities, and lives. Here ora kāinga hapori tangata anō hoki. Kia ora, next slide, please. So we're guided by our key legislation, the Tauranga Order Homes and Communities Act of 2019, which is what established us as an organisation. As you said, I won't get into the text there, but we do have specific provisions within our legislation to support Māori in building capability and capacity, and also in terms of supporting Māori aspirations in relation to urban development and housing generally. We also are the key piece of legislation of the Urban Development Act, which was ratified last year. This essentially sets Tauranga Order up as a regulator, provides us and allows us the opportunity to be able to create or designate large tracts of land as specified development projects, which gives us provides a whole toolbox of regulatory type powers, so consent and approval abilities. It sets us up as a road controlling authority. We can acquire land. We have those powers available as well. We haven't actually initiated any part of the Act yet. We're exploring a number of parts of sites across the country, particularly in Auckland, for potential designation as SDP, but we're actually yet to enact any at this stage. Next slide, please. So Tauranga Order is also part of the Mahi Partnership Program. I think Victoria was probably going to touch lightly on this in her presentation this morning. The Mahi Partnership Program was initiated by the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development at the beginning of 2020. Now, the intent with the Mahi Partnership Program was to create a consolidated forum, essentially, with member representation, other agency partners from other parts of local government that have responsibilities for Māori housing. So it's led by HUD, it's supported by Te Puni Kōkiri, Tauranga Order, Ministry of Social Development, and MB. So the intent of the Mahi Partnership Program is to support the allocation of funding. Government announced funding this year, which totaled around about 730 million, to iwi partnership projects. It meets fortnightly. It has an operational arm and a governance function also, and we're an embedded part of that program. So it's probably important to note that for the Bay of Plenty region, funding allocation, triaging the partnership opportunities with Kahu, we'll talk about soon how that works, is through the Mahi channel, which Tauranga Order is very much a part of. Next slide, please. So I referred to Mahi funding. The funding was announced this year. It's in two parts. It all comes out of the Housing Acceleration Fund, which was announced at the beginning of the year, the $3.8 billion, as I understand it. The dedicated carve-out for Māori includes in these two parts in the slide. Part one is Whai Kainga Whai Oranga, 380 million, as well as another 350 million for Māori infrastructure support. The way the funding will be allocated is going to be through two channels. So this has just been announced this week. It's project pathways as well as a program pathway. Project pathway is sort of status quo in terms of how funding has been provided to individual projects to support Māori housing outcomes through the previous funding streams that Te Puni Kōkiri previously managed. The program pathway is something slightly different. So that's intended for where we have sort of consortia type arrangements of iwi coming together to collaborate on housing outcomes collectively, and they will be provided bulk level funding to support their housing aspirations. In addition to those two funding streams, well, actually, in fact, those two funding streams, I should note, are both administered by Hara Te Puni Kōkiri, but the decisions around how allocation is to be determined will work through the Mahi Partnership Program. So Kāinga Ora, MSD and MB will have some input into the decisions around allocation. Probably important to note there is an Infrastructure Acceleration Fund as well that Kāinga Ora administers, was a contestable part of it, at least anyway, for allocation to local government, to developers, and also to iwi. Today is actually the announcement day on that, 15 October, of selection of those who submitted applications through our EII process to move through to the next phase to submit RFPs for the funding they're seeking through that $1 billion contestable fund. I understand a number of iwi have JV'd with councils for that pathway also. So there's a reasonable amount of funding that's going to be directed towards Māori land development housing projects over the coming 4 years. Next slide, please. Okay, actually, I'm going to now defer to Kahurangi, who will pick up the presentation from here, just to talk a bit about what we do within Kāinga Ora around triaging of Māori partnership projects. Kia ora, Kahu.
Kia ora. Yeah, so the Whenua Māori development team is part of Te Kuratau within Kāinga Ora, and there's a bit of an explanation on your screens there about what Te Kuratau does. But I guess basically within Kāinga Ora, Te Kuratau is a team that works both within and across Kāinga Ora as well as regionally for the primary purpose of increasing Māori housing opportunities, particularly on Māori land. And to do that, we utilise existing capability that we have within Kāinga Ora in terms of urban development. And you'll see that list of values there, which links through to the Mahi Partnership Program that Amos previously talked about. Yeah, basically working with our partners within the Mahi Partnership Program to increase housing opportunities for Māori. And ideally, it's not just about the housing itself, it's about using housing as a bit of a mechanism to increase whānau outcomes. Could we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so there's a bit of a range of ways where Kāinga Ora can assist with Māori landowners and Māori housing opportunities. And so we'll go through each of these in turn, but I guess in terms of the Kāinga Ora involvement, it changes a bit depending on if there's a public housing outcome to a project or if we're just inputting into whānau housing on Māori-owned land. If we go through to the next slide. Yeah, so my team's the Whenua Māori development team, and so really this is a team that brings together all sorts of different expertise within Kāinga Ora. Often people are seconded from different teams. So myself coming from a planning background, also Stacey, who will be speaking soon, coming from a commercial background. We also use the expertise of our urban designers and our development team as well to provide detail on costings of some of these projects. And we have a bit of a process that we follow and that's still being worked through. And so that's just to kind of get an idea of what landowner aspirations may be for a piece of land, provide a bit of preliminary assessment on that. And then where we're beginning to head to is to see how else we can use Kāinga Ora's capability and powers under the Urban Development Act to try and get a lot of these projects moving. The biggest upfront cost for a lot of these landowners is just getting initial concept plans and understanding constraints of their site a bit better. And if they don't have the funding in place to do that, then they're caught in a bit of a catch-22 situation, really. So wherever we can use our expertise there, the better. Just another note on the Te Kuratau team. So Te Kuratau also has regional teams, so they're involved in a lot of engagement there, whereas the Whenua Māori development team is more of a technical team, and we pull in expertise across the country and work across the country while working with the Te Kuratau regional teams, as well as the Kāinga Ora regional directors and their property teams. If we go to the next slide, please. And I'll pass over to Stacey.
Kia ora kahu. So one of the ways that Kāinga Ora can partner with iwi and Rapu Māori landowners in particular is through the provision of social housing on their land, where the provision of other types of housing, market rentals, home ownership, affordable rentals is involved. It gets a little trickier because we currently don't really have the mandate to do this, but provision of social housing is our BAU. And so we are looking to increase the provision of social housing throughout the motu. And one of the ways we can do that is partnering with Māori landowners for their whenua. And what we are trying to do is stay true to those values that were a couple of slides up in terms of mana motuhake and tino rangatira and those sorts of things, and go and provide only what is needed for the landowners to achieve their aspirations when it comes to social housing. So leasing the land from them is one of the ways that we can do this, where the landowner wants to use the land for social housing, at least in the short, medium, longish term, to be honest. Then we can lease the ground off them, and then we can build the houses, and either we can manage them, or if it's transitional housing, we get a transitional housing provider to manage that, or potentially if the landowner is a community housing provider, we can look at subleasing the houses back to the landowner as a community housing provider, and then they can manage the houses, and that really enables them to, exert the mana motuhake over their whenua that they desire. So we're looking at a lease term of 25 years, but the idea is that the landowner at the end of that 25 years, the houses are provided for that landowner to do with what they will, whether that's continue providing social housing, whether it's provide it as market or affordable house rentals, or home ownership products, that's theirs for them. Now, as I'm sure everybody on this call appreciates, that building houses, and in particular building houses and infrastructure on land that does not currently have infrastructure to it, is not a cheap exercise. And so in order for Kāinga Ora to be financially sustainable, we do need to recoup our capital that we invest in there. And 25 years is not a long time to recoup that capital. If you think about a mortgage, mortgages are traditionally about 30 years now, and that's just building the houses, not the infrastructure. We have worked with HUD, who's our funding source, to agree that what government should provide is a time frame which is reasonable for values aligned landowners, and whereby they get the houses at the end of that term, and that's the 25-year term. It's aimed at socially oriented landlords. So as I said, this is unlikely to tick the boxes for iwi o Raupu Māori who want to use their land for commercial advantage in the short term, because there's no ground rent involved in this. And this is this structure is mirroring what the government, how the government partners with community housing providers now, in terms of ideally providing enough funding so that a community housing provider can repay a mortgage over 25 years, and therefore at the end of those 25 years, those houses are unencumbered and they can either continue using them as social housing or anything like that, but the capital has been paid off at the end of that time. So that's what we have said we think is a fair proposition. Now, it's quite an expensive way to build houses because, as I said, paying off the capital over 25 years is quite a short time. Kaingora usually effectively pays off the capital for our own houses over 50 years. So it's halving the time that we get to recoup our capital. So therefore the weekly rent on these houses is quite high. And therefore, from a taxpayer's value for money perspective, we do need to be quite targeted in how we roll these leases out. However, Bay of Plenty and Rotorua in particular is an area of significant housing need. And so we are in the process of negotiating a number of these leases in Rotorua, and that will hopefully mean some additional houses come online in the next 12 odd months, 12, maybe probably 18 months by the time they get occupied. Partner with Māori landowners on their whenua, and that's what's taking up a lot of my time at the moment. And hopefully we'll actually get some really good outcomes for the whenua Māori. I mean, Amos has an example of his whenua down in Christchurch that Amos, you said that you had a similar offering about 23 years ago and you didn't take it up. And if you had done it now, you would have almost had houses. So hopefully a number of Māori landowners will take this up and partner with Kaingora for the provision of social and public and transitional housing. So that's the key whenua partnerships initiative that we're looking at the moment. As I said, the provision of other sorts of housing, market or affordable rentals or home ownership products is a little bit trickier because we don't have a clear mandate to provide those ourselves. And so that's where the Maihi sort of funding can help with the provision of those things. Sadly, and everybody on this call will appreciate that 700 million sounds like a lot of money, but it doesn't go very far when it's spread across the whole country. So we are also very keen to figure out how we can get some financial providers, so commercial banks or impact investing, to participate in the provision of housing on whenua Māori, and that's also a work in progress. And if we can solve that, that would be fantastic, because as you guys all know, there's an awful lot of whenua Māori around the Bay of Plenty that is just dying for houses, just gagging for houses. So hopefully we can get that sorted. But that's on the to-do. So I'll just get you to go to the next slide, please. So there's a couple of other commercial partnership ideas. So as I said, the whenua partnerships are for iwi o Raupu Māori that have land and mostly want to use that land for social purposes. On the other hand, there are activities that Kaingora participates in where iwi o Raupu Māori can commercially participate for commercial advantage, and social procurement and disposal partnerships are those things. I mean, Kaingora spends a lot of money on, builder partners and construction firms and consultants and everything like that. So social procurement is something that we are also focused on, and I'll get you to go to the next slide, please. So the opportunities are quite wide-ranging, from professional services, design work, also capital works. We have a number of partnerships throughout the country with iwi Rōpū Māori who want to build construction businesses or property development businesses. And as you may know as well, the government has a requirement that a certain percentage of contracts for all government agencies are awarded to Rōpū Māori. So we're not quite at the required percentage. I think it's 5%, might be 7%. We're not quite there yet, but we are working on it. And we actively participate in the wider government initiatives to increase the capacity and capability of iwi Rōpū Māori that want to participate in property development. So next slide, please. And then the last area that Kāinga can partner with iwi Rōpū Māori on for their commercial benefit is disposal partnerships. Now, this is more in Auckland, but we are getting some large scale projects in other areas of the country. So in Auckland, where we have large scale projects where we sell super lots to property developers to develop market housing or sometimes Kiwi build housing, we have criteria for those sale processes, and we are actively incorporating some kaupapa to encourage and enable iwi Rōpū Māori to participate in those processes so that they can benefit from the commercial uplift that a lot of other property developers have seen on our large scale projects. So next slide, please. So yeah, we can help with the super lots and any other sort of land or houses that are surplus to requirements. So anywhere in the country where Kāinga owns land or houses that we are looking to dispose of, we usually, often Māori have first rights of refusal by law, but even in situations where that's not the case, to encourage participation of iwi Rōpū Māori, at least in at the same level, if not with some additional support compared to the Pākehā economy, I guess. And that's really the end of our presentation. So thank you for that. And if anybody's got any questions, Amos and Kahu would be happy.
Thank you very much. I noticed that John Holyoke had a question, I think.
Thank you, and kia ora, ko John Holyoke tōku ingoa. Thanks for the presentation. It's maybe a question and maybe a comment. I'm probably more interested in what other products you guys have got in the pipeline. I actually got really excited. I got really excited by the presentation in terms of the partnership and talking about how we're going to work with iwi, and love the principles around mana motuhake and those sorts of things. So great stuff. I didn't really see where the role for council was coming through in that partnership, and it's obvious to me that we've already got really strong relationships on the ground with a lot of our iwi, and we've got forum that we're already working through. So I think to be able to talk about that with you guys and be able to get better access into places that we all already know about would be helpful, not undermining what you already might know. And then I've got to be honest, I got a bit disappointed because the products don't feel any different from what Housing New Zealand was doing 20 or 30 years ago. And so, from a mana motuhake perspective, I'm going, really? This felt like accessing land to hit your state housing targets. And I'm not sure how that provides mana motuhake for mana whenua, tangata whenua. So I was really looking for how are we going to help build wealth. And I don't think a 25-year term on a house is depreciating over that period of time is really building wealth. How we underwriting lending, like you guys do with the Welcome Home Loan. Why aren't we doing that for Māori? Because that's the biggest constraint in New Zealand in terms of being able to borrow to get housing on Māori land, right? So I felt a bit deflated at the end of it because it felt very same old, I'd have to say. But maybe there's some other stuff that you guys are working on that is coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'll just start with the first question around how we partner potentially with local government. Yeah, 100%. We're a place-based organisation now. We have our regional directors established, regional managers, and Te Kurutau's regional team. So 100%, that's exactly what we need to be doing is probably actually, to be fair, leveraging a little bit off the relationships already established by councils, looking to work together. I think you probably would have seen some of that in Victoria's presentation around the relationship that exists between Apotiki and TCC and other local government organisations. Yeah, more of that would strongly get in behind. Yeah, look, sorry, that what we were really presented was one of a number of different types of options. You're absolutely right, and I think to Stacey's point when she referred to me as an example of where these lease arrangements can potentially work, this is true. 20 years ago, my family was offered the opportunity to partner in one of these types of leaseback arrangements. Yeah, we'd be getting the return on that, those improvements in about 2 years from now. The land's unfortunately still undeveloped. Capital values around about 500,000. 2 years' time, if we had done the deal, would be about 4.5 million. So great opportunity when you're not proposing to do anything with your land for 20 years, which turns out to have been the case for my whānau. Not the sort of panacea of how you deliver good outcomes, good return for Māori on their land. Absolutely not. Just one of probably about half a dozen different types of approaches that we can certainly explore. But a lot of that thinking is occurring within the Waihi Partnership Program, and we're part of that process of developing up the products and services that we need to be offering to iwi rōpū Māori. This one that we talked about is probably one of 6 to 8 that we're currently working through at the moment. I might just hook over. So yeah, look, there's more to come, more information to come. These types of presentations are useful because we can keep you guys updated on what is developing and what's evolving. I might just hook over to Stacey, knows a little bit more about the PHO products that are in development and how they might benefit Māori.
Yeah, there's a number of I 100% agree that these do look a little bit like the same old, but the intention, and I haven't been around for same old, but the intention I think is different. Our intention is not for Kaingora to access land for social housing. It's to achieve the housing aspirations of the landowners. Now, if the housing aspirations of the landowners are to provide social housing on their land, then fantastic. This is it. We can do this. And to your mana motuhake point, if, as I said, if the landowner is a community housing provider, or they want to be a community housing provider, or they know a community housing provider that they prefer to Kaingora, then we want to work with them to achieve their aspirations. And so certainly the Te Kurutau team here and many people across the wider Kaingora team are all about putting the iwi rōpū Māori in the front and going, what do you want? What can you do? What do you need our help with? Because we don't want to come in over the top of anybody and exert our desires or needs or wants. We just want to help fill the gaps to get them where they want to go. The point about the other types of housing tenures is, as Amos says, the Mahi funding can go a little bit towards that. And then to your point, the private sector finance clearly needs attention and somehow encouragement to lend onto whenua Māori. And that is certainly something that the government is looking at. and it's certainly something that we do need to address. I don't know how to solve it right now, but it's something that we are looking at. The tricky part is that Kaingaroa it needs to be financially sustainable. So while we would really like to provide funding on the to provide more capital than we recoup, i.e. have shorter lease terms or those sorts of things, we can't do that and be financially sustainable, you know, in the long term. So that's where the Mahi funding can come in. To your point though, and one thing that maybe I should have mentioned in that leasing sector section is, again, trying to put the landowner in the driver's seat on what they want, having the ability to buy us out, effectively just repay our capital at any point, is something that is included in those leases. And so if they can, if we solve this banking situation, if they can get a loan, then they can take them on day one if they want, or year 5, or just whenever they're ready to do that. And that just enables the houses to get built before we solve this financing issue, because you're right that's the big question. And if we can solve it, it'll make a massive difference. We just haven't solved it yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Weber.
Yes, thank you. And it's further to where John's coming from, and it's really interesting that we have a TAPSL on the panel. Western Bay many years ago put all the infrastructure in place to enable a 300 lot subdivision in Makatu to proceed. And it sounds a little bit like your property, Carmo. It's sat there doing nothing for quite some time. What is new that's going to enable us to say, we'll meet with them on Monday and we'll start building houses? Because all of the infrastructure is right at the boundary. It's been sitting there and we haven't had a recovery on it for quite some time. We would dearly like to move this forward. Is there anything new that you're announcing today that says we can actually, as I say, turn up on Monday and start building some houses? Thank you.
Yeah, no, good question. So can you just answer a further question? What is the ownership of the land you're referring to?
Tauranga Lakes Trust own the block.
Oh, good one. Okay, yeah, no, 100%. Look, those are the types of opportunities we're looking for as Mahi, as well as Kaingaroa. So when I say Mahi, that basically means any of the agencies, no wrong door approach. You can come to Kaingaroa, TPK, and it doesn't really matter for an initial conversation around what the opportunity might be with the land. Collectively as the Mahi Partnership Program, we can triage what that opportunity is. Going back to Mr. TAPSL, this is exactly what he does within Kaingaroa on behalf of the Mahi Partnership Program. That, hooking back to what the opportunity would be, that's an obvious one, you know, and what we can do with that type of scenario is we can provide the housing, 100%, different types of housing, whether it's a OSM off-site manufactured product, a relocatable option if that's what the EB wants, or a traditional stick build. We will guide the landowner through the process. If the infrastructure is in place, those are the types of partnership opportunities the Mahi Partnership Program would look to prioritise for housing. So the funding that then becomes available is the Tauranga $380 million, or if there's let's just say the infrastructure is the boundary on some of these sites you've referred to within the land block, then the Māori Infrastructure Fund's also available to help with service connection to the actual units once they arrive. So the Mahi funding provides capital grants for construction, capability grants, and infrastructure grants. So this would be an obvious one to get in front of Mahi pretty soon in terms of assessing what the opportunity is that does. Understand the aspiration of Tauranga Lakes Trust on that block of land, and then meeting attempting to meet their expectations. Going back to what Stacey was saying, look, let's say there's a public housing takeout they're interested in exploring with us. Kaingaroa would look after that part of it in terms of assessing what the opportunity would be. If it's mixed tenure development, affordable housing outcomes, that's the Mahi sort of approach to how we work through who's going to run point through the through that opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amos. And can I just thank the team from Tauranga? It's been fantastic. We do need to move on, but thank you very, very much. And that's given us a lot to consider going forward. So thank you for your time. Can I now hand over to Mayor Stevie Chadwick, who wants to give us an update on housing projects in Rotorua.
Kia ora. Thank you, Judy. And hello, colleagues around the Ropu. And great to hear that presentation from Kāinga. And it does reinforce, as Mayor Weber said, local-led solutions are the way you've got to partner with this agency to get some traction on the ground. Judy, we had a half-hour presentation, but I see we've only got 10 minutes. I sent it through, so I've sort of cherry-picked the important message on a verbal update in the interests of time. And Jeff, our CEO, will chip in from the other side of the lake as a sweep if I forget anything. So welcome everybody. And the story that we wanted to tell was the story that is slightly different, but it's also great for us to hear the stories of other parts of the region. And for us, ours is one that has got markedly worse because of COVID. And you'll be very aware of that. When you turn off the tourism tap, both the domestic tap and the international tap of 70% of our visitors, the impact on our GDP from tourism that was 12% plummets, and also the 21% of our tourism workforce find that they're either marginalised to weekend work, contract work, or loss of jobs. And so this is a huge chunk of the people in Rotorua. And the difference, I think, for us as a region, when you hear different parts of tourism calling out for government money, is we're not Queenstown. Their workers were largely international. When the tap was turned off, they left. But these are our people, and they're still living in our community, and they've all got housing aspirations for their family. But we've had a bit of a perfect storm here too for us, and that the demographics for us in Rotorua present us with amazing challenges for us that are not experienced yet by other areas to the same extent. And Stacey alluded a little bit to that. Our district is increasingly Māori and younger than the rest of New Zealand. And as a result of these factors, we've got higher unemployment, benefit dependency, and a large number of NEETs, young kids not in employment and training. And these outcomes have been exacerbated by COVID. But we've also got a supply side challenge that's come in, as well as our challenge with our younger people and tourism. We've had growth of 13% over the last 8 years, but housing construction hasn't kept up with that growth. And the costs of housing have risen for us, and the median house price now rises 93%. So a colossal rise, and affordability of these people to ever aspire to owning their own home has gone because of that constrained supply. So while we said growth was really good, housing didn't keep up, and we were very aware of it after last March, and COVID and the impact on tourism suddenly became graphic for us, with those that were seen as having lost their home and on our streets. So that has put a lot of pressure on us and other agencies, and it really required a local solution. The housing register in 2015 had 23 applicants, and in 2021, 741. So that's just, the rise is just keeping on, the graph keeps rising. So high demand, constrained supply, and low incomes with COVID has really thrown a curveball to us, and we're calling it a humanitarian crisis. And so we have got the ear of government, and we have formed our local task force. And I think that's where I heard Stacey and Ropu talking about the Mahi Māori solutions for housing. And this task force, based on the emergency that we had, ministers have come to the party with us. We have got 850 families now in motels, and that's 280 units that they take up. That is no comfort to us at all, and shows the need for us to be building. We've got great NGOs around our task force now. They're working with us for navigation and support, and we've separated out those with families with others, and that's been a big pressure valve that is being managed now by MSD and MHUD. We've also got a housing hub formed, which is great. So that's been great, working with Ngāti Whakaui there, and they're providing holistic assessment, kaupapa-based assessment, and then they match to accommodation and support. And then we're moving into a virtual hub later this year. And it's now to the supply side of housing. So Kāinga are continuing to work with us. It is part of that partnership. And they came in early, as you heard Stacey say, because they were convinced by the demographics and the statistical evidence that we had a crisis here. So they're helping us with a pipeline of housing, transitional, social, and redevelopment of existing sites, which is every bit absolutely matters. Greenfield developments and opportunities for mixed housing, including affordable and market housing. So leasing Māori land, iwi land, and iwi has to come to the table for that. You can't force them to the table, and they've all got aspirations. And I did hear, I think it was Kahu talking about the need for infrastructure and some of the announcements that are coming out today to help with that. So locally, we've got an emergency housing task force. It's got council, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Kāinga, MSD, also Te Puni Kōkiri, Health, Police, a range of iwi entities and trust. So I congratulate Jeff and his work with his team and our planning division to actually activate that. And they're working from the council building, and that's really a great way of rubbing shoulders together. So where do we start with the housing crisis? And Jeff might come in here, but we're looking urgently to deliver 3,000 homes over the next 3 years, then 3,000 more, and then 4,000 housing lots. So this is an amazing aspiration and a target that Jeff has actually put to enable onto one of our Deputy Chief Executives, John Paul Gaston. We're focusing first on two areas, and these are sort of quite political hotspots of Fenton Street, the CBD, and Nongataha. So there's great aspirations there, and we're working with all of those other partners for what we can do. And it will look different. You're hearing and reading in the media about the motels used for emergency housing. Gives me no comfort to have 850 families in there, and we want to move that pipeline quickly. So we've got to change the conversation with our community about a different form of housing modality that they're going to see in different parts of our district. And that's quite a conversation that we're having. At the same time, we're having to invest in safety initiatives and also economic development to take away the total emphasis, well, a majority emphasis that we had on tourism. Tourism will return, it will dribble back, that pipeline, we're talking of the three waters, it'll dribble back, but it will never be as it was before. So it gives us an opportunity now really to work with pace and scale with council, and that was really the large majority of our long-term plan this year. The community don't get it yet, but we've got to work with developers. We've got to work together collaboratively. And one of the saddest aspects is the negative press actually ruins the reputation while we're really working collaboratively together to solve our housing crisis. And Jeff, you may have something you want to add about that pipeline and the housing build that I would have missed.
Steve, I think you've actually provided an incredibly rounded view as to what's happening. I'm happy to fill in any details if anyone's got any questions. I
Oh, well, okay, thanks, Jeff. That's very good. We're not shoulder to shoulder here today, but I am impressed with the pace and the scale now. But you had to get those partners in. You had to convince them of our story, our demographics, show the scene of a crisis. I've called it a humanitarian crisis, and that has certainly got the government agencies now working in with us. We're now needing to work with developers and others too, and iwi, who are now sharing their aspirations, so you can get that sort of mahi partnership underway. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and that's a half-hour presentation in 10 minutes.
Oh.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, are there any questions? I don't see any on the board, so I'm going to assume not. We're about 15 minutes behind in our schedule. I'm just wondering whether we want to break for morning tea now, because I'm just aware of other presenters who are booked in for 10:45 to talk to us, or do you want to just keep going? I'm happy either way, but we could even shift the RMA reform discussion between ourselves to the end of the meeting so that we don't hold up any of our presenters who've come at a particular time. Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. Am I not muted? Am I? No, thank you, Chair. Just a question to Steve, and I guess it's a bit of an observation. Now, she did say 850 families. Is that right, Steve?
That's right.
Holy hell, Jesus.
And they are our families.
Yep.
So those people through the media that say busloads have been shipped into Rotorua, it's not true. Those people, I don't think, have gone to our suburbs that we've always known had housing needs there and seen that these are our people. When you get a nanny come to the customer service centre that you know really well, who says a $30 a week increase in her rent means she can no longer stay in her house, which is overcrowded anyway, and I need to go into one of those motels. So the answer is build, build, build.
Yep, and going a little bit further than that, and we've been doing some stuff here in Kawerau, and what is concerning me though, with the number you're talking about, and I know what's going on in Mayor Webber's patch still, and the products that are drying up around the country with COVID, it's quite terrifying knowing what's coming down the track at us. That's an issue.
Yeah, that's that construction constraint.
Yep. And so, but can I just make a comment, Chair, please, about Amos's presentation, and thank you very much. But I a little bit like John, and I'm not getting too cynical in my old age or my own grief, but some of this I have heard before, and I hope that we can go forward on this, Amos, because there's in my patch, we've got Tūwharetoa Ki Kawerau here, are the major landowners now, and incidentally they had to buy all that land. They had to buy their own bloody land back, which is a bit of an issue, but and their own developments that they would like to go ahead with. It would be great if you and your team could come here and meet with particularly my deputy, because she's on the settlement trust, and it sounds quite exciting, but we want to get hold of this by the scruff of the neck. I concur with what John Holyoake is saying. We have heard a lot of this before, and I've been around as long as most people now, and but I don't want to be too negative about it, but gee, I'd certainly like to have a chance of letting Tūwharetoa and yourself partner if we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? That's fine. I think it's 10:30. I think we will take a break, but I'm going to ask that we make it a 10-minute break rather than a 15-minute break, and we will shift the RMA update towards the end of the agenda so we don't inconvenience any other presenters and stick to our timetable. So we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Is that okay? Cool. Agenda, which is the Māori housing support. And so I'd like to invite the people from Te Puni Kōkiri who are here to share with us on that to start. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Tēnā koe, Mayor Turner. I'm going to try to share the screen with you. Tony, I might need your help, just in case. how has that, can everybody see?
Yep, that's looking great. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Success. Well, kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you for your time today. It always humbles me to hear the challenges and issues that we're facing. The housing crisis has been around for quite some time, and it's really good to hear that we are beginning to make some leeway into this devil of a kaupapa. The presentation you're about to see is going to provide you an overview of the role of Te Puni Kōkiri as a ministry, our strategic priorities, and the mahi that we're engaged in our partnerships. And I go, great. Okay, so Te Puni Kōkiri is the Ministry of Māori Development and was established under the Ministry of Māori Development Act in 1991. Our key role is a principal advisor to government on Māori wellbeing and development. We seek to promote increases in the levels of achievement attained by Māori in education, training, employment, health, and economic resource development. We monitor and liaise with each department and agency that provides or has a responsibility to provide services to or for Māori. And our purpose there is to ensure the adequacy of those services. Te Puni Kōkiri has 6 regions across the country with 18 offices and approximately 350 staff. We're here from, both Leanne Gardner is in here somewhere, and I are from the Waikato, there she is, from the Waikato Waiariki region. We have 4 offices, one based in Hamilton, Tauranga, Whakatane and Rotorua. We have relationships with the 27 iwi and a number of whānau, hapu, land trusts, kura, hauora Māori entities and Māori business. Our scope of work is vast. And we each, as advisors or senior advisors or principal advisors, hold multiple portfolios across that spectrum. So TPK is a really small ministry with quite a large remit. And as such, we're really deliberate and careful where we place our efforts. We've got the 3 strategic priorities, which I haven't changed the slide. Here we are. 3 strategic priorities with 9 areas to reflect our intent. Yeah. You can't hear me.
I don't know about the others, but we can, no, I can hear you, but we only see the first page of your presentation. It hasn't actually flicked forward. I don't know if that's what the others are experiencing too. So why don't I try have a go at sharing from here?
That would be
your share and we'll have a go.
That would be great.
No
Thank you,
worries.
Tony.
No worries.
And everybody's missed out on fantastic visuals, by the way. No, anything.
Okay. Just give me a second.
Isn't it awful when you suffer dry mouth at a time like this? Lovely.
You're doing well.
Oh, cheers, Lee. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, up. Just to slide number 2. And back one more, thanks, Tony. So as I was talking about our mandate and so forth, these are our roles in the public sector, and I haven't read out these roles. I'm not one for reading off the slide, just to describe what's going on behind the scenes. Next slide, please. Ta-da! So as I was saying, we are a small ministry with a large scope of work. With our 3 strategic priorities, that's where we are. So within the Māori economic resilience sits our housing, employment and Māori enterprise. Within these areas within the housing area work, our high level outcome is that more Māori live in their own homes that they own. More Māori live in safe, warm and secure housing. It sounds like a very simple thing, but as we all appreciate, it is quite a large body of work. Our work in TPK has a strong community development lens in which we seek to identify any opportunities that not only relate to the increasing supply of whare, but also have potential opportunities around social procurement and employment to grow the local economy and improve wellbeing for all. A recent example of this piece of how we do this is our work in Kaingaroa Forest Village. So for those that don't know, and I'm sure you are all very aware, Kaingaroa has a 98% Māori population on whenua Māori. In 1987, it was actually set up as a forestry service village back in the day. In 1987, Forestry Service closed their doors and the assets were transferred to the Trust with a licence to occupy agreement under the iwi. The maintenance of the infrastructure fell into disrepair over the many years, as did the state of the 145 homes in the village. TPK played a critical role in this community development kaupapa, and we brought together critical partners to actively engage in the infrastructure, whānau plans, home repairs, and as well as to rebuild the Kaingaroa Community Hub. Originally, it was a community development plan. This is one of the unique ways that Te Puni Kōkiri operates. We are boots on the ground. We have regional relationships. We are engaged with our Māori communities. So a community development plan came about and identified 3 priorities, in which the infrastructure was one, housing repairs was another. Much work has been achieved to date, but there's still heaps to do. We have already realised the short to medium term outcomes of this project, and we are yet to see the long-term outcome or long-term impacts that will bring together employment, housing and Māori enterprise. I'm a little bit hesitant at the moment because you have all heard about the Maihi framework and so forth, which are actually the next slides in the presentation. So I'll go over them really, really quickly if you could bear with me. So these are the Maihi principles. Maihi is an acronym for Māori and Iwi Housing Innovation. The framework and these principles were designed or developed in collaboration with iwi leaders and Crown agencies, and it's the driver of fundamental shifts in the way Crown responds to Māori at pace, at scale, and with integrated approaches. The lead agency was Te Kura Kāinga o Tuapapa, also known as HUD, who with Te Matapehi, the iwi chairs and others collaborated to ensure that the new Māori housing strategy was not only had legal integrity, but had a high level of accountability to Māori. As you can see in the centre there, Te Mauri o Te Whānau is at the centre of all responses. Each principle around that centre supports the growth and building of strength and resilience from within. Can we pop to the next one, please? So this is our the new National Māori Housing Strategy. I've just taken this one image of the whare tupuna, of the wharenui, excuse me, to just illustrate how all of the pieces come together. So the Maihi principles and framework actually sit within the back wall. At the back wall, gosh, I wish I had a pointer, but that's okay. We have the Māori Crown relationships, systems, supports, Māori-led solutions, supply and sustainability, and they're going up the back wall. These areas are the 6 components of the wharenui. Everything coming out on your left-hand side are all of the mahitahi group, the collective of the Iwi Chairs Forum, Whānau Hapu Iwi, Marae, Whānau Hapuri, Te Matapehi and Māori housing providers. They are developing collective actions to progress their housing aspirations. On the right-hand side, we have Te Kura Kāinga o Tuapapa, HUD, all the Crown agencies, including TPK, Kāinga Ora MB, MSD and Internal Affairs. We operate under the Maihi initiative, guided by the principles and the framework. We apply kaupapa approaches to take the necessary systems approach to deliver the positive outcomes for Māori housing. The vision for everybody, oh, excuse me, sorry, at the back wall, yeah, you can see my hands. Oh no, you can't see my hands. We have the our monitoring body. The monitoring body is the Maihi Whare Wānanga. They ensure that the approach and all the activities within are keeping in line with what we're supposed to do. Up the top, the heke, the ribs of the wharenui, we look at a respond, a review and a reset. So our response is the initial, we're dealing with the crisis or how we're dealing with a situation. We review how we're approaching. The examples from that response and review will help us reset our policies. So in a nutshell, the strategy brings all of these components together with all of these partners, and we're all locked in the same whare. Next slide, please. So our mates from Kāinga Ora have already been through the oh, excuse me. Sorry, Tony. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Sorry, it's frozen on there. There we go.
Okay. Cool. So you may have seen these images before, and Kāinga Ora have already been through much of the kōrero that I was going to, so I've been madly scrapping out. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but however, the three steps, step 1, 2 and 3, which talk about the Maihi place-based approach, the delivery will be consistent with Maihi, and the investment partnership will take an intergenerational approach. These are really, really key aspects for how we may work together as local government, as ministry, and as whānau hapu iwi. Yeah, I think that will be enough to put it all on there. Oh, sorry, what this investment and approach actually enables the progress towards the Ka Ora, Maihi Ka Ora action plan, which was in the previous slide. I think I got these mucked up back to front. Can we go to the next slide, please? So some of the opportunities, as I was saying earlier, Te Puni Kōkiri works in this space. We're quite experienced working across government. We're experienced in dealing with whenua Māori. We're experienced in working with our whānau and all of the complexities that come with that, that come with those relationships. But however, by utilising our roles, there's some real practical things we can do to implement our solutions. But I mean, local government has already done a lot of great work. There's always more to do. One area that I would like to bring ahead is around the task force, and the two that I am fairly familiar with are the ones in Tauranga, which is the Kāinga Tupu, originally the Mayoral Task Force, where TCC and Western Bay, along with providers, DHB, Te Puni Kōkiri, philanthropics, hapu hauora, everybody who's been involved in either food sovereignty, sorry, I missed someone, food sovereignty, homelessness, rough sleepers, a huge amount of effort has gone into this kaupapa. There are some aspirational goals to achieve by 2023. One of those is the emphasis on COVID-19 recovery and supporting those who are currently placed in emergency accommodation. There's other targets that are in place. I don't really want to go too much into depth of those. There are challenges around that, which I'm sure everybody is quite aware of. There has been an identification of the Western Bay of Plenty by central government as a housing need hotspot. We have identified in Te Puni Kōkiri that the Eastern Bay of Plenty, including Rotorua, are part of our surge regions where the existing housing stock is in dire need of support as well as creating the new supply. Te Rākau Taumatua is the Rotorua Housing Task Force, which has already been spoken about again. But however, there are other projects that I'd just like to go through that TPK are working on that will have the benefit of local government collaborations. One of them is the Waimana Community Development Kaupapa. We've been working with Waimana community for a wee while through Waimana Kaku Trust. To support a progressive home ownership model. Now they have 40 whānau as their as their rōpū to progress into home ownership. We have been working with them to identify the complexities around their whenua, working with TAT as well. And also recently we are in there with some financial capability workshops. So we, as I was saying earlier before, boots on the ground, working with the community, kanohi ki te kanohi, identifying what their needs are and building capability and capacity as we move through. We've all heard of the projects across the Eastern Bay of Plenty through to Tairāwhiti, which are the Wale projects. Some fantastic work has been going on in there, and also with Opotiki. And there are further opportunities as well for joint agency groups, aka JAGs. Now, these have the potential to relieve some pressure of local government teams when it comes to those whenua Māori developments, but also in just connecting and having those relationships with iwi, hapu and land trusts. Now, these are the ones that are either not quite shovel ready or are shovel ready. There's potential there. One rōpū that Leanne is actually working with is the Matakuare Trust. Leanne, would you like to jump in here?
O kia ora koutou, ko Leanne Gardner hau. No Tauranga mō nā hau, engari kei te mahi hau. Kei roto te rohe o mātātua. Oh, yes. So, yeah, just to touch base on what E was saying, the focus of Te Puni Kōkiri really is to see our whānau going back to their whenua and living in a warm, safe and healthy home. We do that in a number of ways, or our services and the products that we do have support them to do that, either through looking at what the condition of their existing houses or supporting the aspiration around a new whare on their whenua. So in terms of that, Te Puni Kōkiri does have a housing repairs program that it delivers across communities. Its current focus at this time is repairing houses on existing houses on whenua Māori, but we do also support the repairs of houses on general land if the state of the house is not conducive to the health of the whānau. So I just wanted to touch base on that service, as some of you may not be aware that we do have that service. So we've been delivering housing repairs since 2015, and in that time, particularly in the Eastern Bay, I would suggest that we have provided essential repairs to in excess of 150 houses on both general and Māori land. So in tandem with that, we also support the building of new houses on whenua Māori, and in that space we do support families either as individuals or Māori collectives, i.e. Māori land trusts, to look at what that might look like for them for their whenua in terms of housing. So we would support feasibilities to do that, all that technical requirements to be able to build houses, and to support them to connect and get the expertise from the other requirements like council regulations, etc. So our feasibility supports our Māori land trusts in that space. We do support capital builds as well, or components of that, particularly for social housing, and we also support infrastructure. And that's either for individual families as well as Māori land trusts. So, I mean, we're trying to do, meet the needs at whatever level and capacity the landowner needs to engage and get their house built. So I just thought I'd touch base on that. And then behind that, we also, as me mentioned, there is also some financial capability that we provide to families who have a housing aspiration through our sorted kāinga ora program. So as an example, in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, we're working with the Matakuare Whānau Trust, who has an aspiration to build quite a comprehensive papakainga development in the Te Whaiti, the Minginui area. In that, so as an example, where we provide that service, it's primarily right at the beginning when a land trust is exploring that. It's about advice and information and connecting them to the right places to get that. When they're in a position to start, that particularly in terms of the shared aspiration of the whānau for papakainga, and that's demonstrated that has been achieved, Then we wrap some feasibility support around them to be able to get that technical expertise to plan out their papakainga. And so currently that I suppose that's just the current position of where that trust is. So that's an example of how it is that we progress a whānau through the various stages of their development. When it gets to, and I think, you know, in terms of the new approach of government working together, I think that's where the value of that comes in when we have complex and quite substantial papakainga development. So we've taken them to the point where they have tested out the capacity to build and what that might look like for them on the ground. And so we are currently just partnering up with other agencies to see what that might look like, and sharing the various resources that each of our agencies have in the papakainga space. Yeah, so that's kind of a snapshot of what Te Puni Kōkiri does on the ground, and translating the Mahi framework into practical solutions for whānau in our communities.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Thanks, Lee. Next slide, please, Tony, and this is us. So we have our 4 officers. I've just put their details up here. I'm sure you already know us, and I'm sure you're already engaged with us. But if you would like to get in touch with us, even if you want us to come down to the council and do a wee presentation about overall, or connect us with specific teams where you may see an opportunity for some collaborative work, I'm more than happy for it. Thank you, everyone. And Lee will answer any questions.
Thank you. Could you take down the presentation, because I can't see the screen to see who's put their hand up? Thank you. Has anybody got any? Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions for me or Leanne? No, you've obviously covered it off pretty well. Thank you very much.
I think everyone beforehand did.
Sorry, I just realised Mayor Eastra does. Sorry.
Yes, I'm just really asking Liana around the housing repair program.
Yes.
Working with Māori Land Trust areas, but as well the individuals on general land. How do I'm just thinking that possibly quite a few people don't know this. How do we get this information to our locals?
Yeah.
I'm thinking especially how many houses need repairs, etc., in the Opotiki district.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we've worked through a number of local providers to deliver our housing repairs program. We've delivered repairs in the Opotiki region and right through to Te Kaha, all the way back through, right, you know, through the State Highway through to Opotiki and you know, and beyond that. There is still opportunity around repairs on general land, but the recent focus now, as I had alluded to, is that given that there aren't as many options for whānau who have got existing houses on whenua Māori, that we now going to focus on providing that support to them in the first instance, but that's not to say that where there is still an absolute need for a family who has got a house on general land, and that, you know, that there's still an ability for them to be able to repair that house, then it would be something that we could still consider. But I mean, as said, the focus now is whenua Māori.
Okay, and so if there's lots of homes, as is the situation on the coast with unconsented homes, which is where we're coming from as a council, are we able to, you know, work in tandem with you to ensure that those families living in those houses can be pointed in the right direction for some help?
Most definitely. Look, we've got a pipeline. We've got a pipeline of housing inquiries and housing repairs. I would suggest that a lot of those whānau have already approached us, and then we would have probably given them the appropriate advice around the current, around the current status of their house. I mean, as you would understand, if it's an unconsented house and it is government money, it would be a different conversation prior to the potential for them to have received a repair. Yeah, but it's never a no from our regional officers. There is always a solution, but very often it may not be the solution that they expect that it would be. Like an immediate repair, there may be other things that we need to support the families with. But yeah, we've had quite comprehensive engagement across our region around housing repairs. Yeah.
Yes, great. What does a different conversation look like, please?
It might actually mean that they may not be aware, you know, what the ramifications of an unconsented house is, and so we would connect them up to the appropriate council to have that discussion and see whether there was a solution in that direction. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Mayor Weber.
Yeah, thank you. I think you got to be very careful about consent homes. It's about improving the accommodation, you know, replacing a supermarket bag with glass at the windows, and not worrying about whether it's consented or not, because the alternative is to evict them from the house and turn them into homeless people. It's about improving.
You're absolutely right. That's why it's never a no from us, and we're very much aware of that. So we always want to make sure that the support that we give them is going to be an improvement in their housing situation. Yes.
That's cool. Okay, thank you very much, ladies, because what we're moving into next is a bit of a briefing from each mayor around what the current provision of housing is on Māori-owned land within each of our rohi. So I'm going to actually ask Mayor Weber if he'd like to start, because I know he has to go fairly soon. So I'm going to give him first options to share with us what's happening in his district.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Judy. I suppose we're fortunate. The Healthy Homes project has worked incredibly well through Maketū and Rere Takahia, and we've seen significant improvements. And I reiterate the point, we don't care whether it's got a builder consent or a certificate of compliance. It's how do we lift the bottom up, the bottom 5%. That's the critical thing. We've had pretty good success with Papakāinga, but as we all know, the roadblock predominantly with Papakāinga is a funding stream to enable people to build the houses. We've reduced our financial contributions for Papakāinga on multiply owned land. We've got different rules for them than general title, and you know we've tried to work. But I think as John Holyoake mentioned in the earlier on, I've been around nearly 12 years now, and not much has changed. We've done some great presentations and had some great korero, but where's the putia? That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Weber. Mayor Riestra, would you be happy just to give us a bit of an update of what's happening with the housing in that space in your district?
Yes, love to. And nice to hear a couple of mentions already from the different government agencies. Thank you very much. So yes, going along the theme of unconsented homes, we acknowledge that over the last year we've realised there's probably about 200 even just along the coast of Opotiki, and we have been looking to emphasise that the dire needs by quoting people are living in cars, caravans and cowsheds, and Wile Te Aho is doing a huge amount of work in that area. And Councillor Rapihana puts it down to Willie's working relationship with the government agencies that has benefited the program that is occurring at the moment. They're looking at 100 houses a year for the next 4 years to be delivered and or built down the coast. They have $9 million in funding, and that's kind of created the a Māori bank, I suppose, where people who apply for a new house go through 3 phases. First of all, They have the checking out that the land is safe and it's right to build on, and the license to occupy is all sorted. Secondly, they look at the financial affordability of the people to be able to then fund what is essentially an interest-free mortgage for the first 10 years. They are trying to pay the houses off in those 10 years or less, and then the money's recycled for more to buy. And if they haven't finished paying off with the mortgage at the end of those 10 years, they're able to renegotiate, and I would assume it would then be with interest. And already they have created, they're expecting 35 houses down the coast by Christmas time. Whakatoia, 10 by Christmas time. And there are already 4 located in Ngāti Porou under the same scheme. So this is very exciting, and a lot is happening there. The last thing that, around the 3 phases for the housing is the housing committee then has to look at who needs a house straight away. And that's actually come about because so many people have come back to Opotiki district since COVID start. Whakatu whanaunga provide an independent social service provider, have already started in the emergency transitional home space. They have opened up 3 homes, occupied, another one is almost ready, and they will have a total of 6 on their first piece of land. At our small subdivision in town, Pirirako, there, which will have 46 lots, there's potential for social housing there. And Whakatoia iwi are looking at 12 hectares of space to be returned through settlement in Hukataya, and they're looking to develop housing, social housing, affordable housing, and fingers crossed for a brand new medical health centre and all that goes around that. And we also know of several marae looking at papakāinga, and I know that there's a lot of work still to be done in that area. However, we've got an unmet demand in all areas. We've got so many people here, moving here as well, that the housing crisis, even though the number of houses are going up almost on a daily basis, we've got a lot to be doing in this space. Kaianga Ora are also in the mix, and they numbers are going up with what they think they can deliver in our space. So that's very exciting. And we know that one section with 3 new houses has gone in for consent at council at the moment. So that's it from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Eastra. I was just going to ask Mayor Stevie Chadwick, this is particularly about developments on Māori-owned land. Just with the presentation you gave us earlier, is there anything specific that you want to add to your presentation about what's happening in that space?
Thank you, Judy. No, iwi are coming to us through our relationships and our partnership, and that's how we're working together on the task force. So yeah, it's slowly, but it's bit by bit as they come with their aspirations. And generally, the major stumbling block is not the planning process, as TPK mentioned, it's the infrastructure. And it's that we are applying to that national government fund. So no, I like the task force approach. It's getting more joined up, and a lot more pressure is coming on to house our own people on iwi land. So they are really waking up now that they see it's a crisis. So no, we've got the right partners in place. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mayor Chadwick. I'd like to ask Commissioner Tolley, do you have anything to add to this around Māori-owned land in the Tauranga region in terms of what's happening in terms of housing development?
Kia ora. Yes, thanks, Judy. So look, I think it's no surprise to anyone that housing affordability and availability across Tauranga City Council in general is a major issue. I think we're going to be the only council in New Zealand that doesn't meet its NPS UD. But particularly for Māori land development, there's also added into that a lack of capability and also a lack of relationship trust. It's had there've been some rocky relationships with TCC in the past. So we've been doing a lot of trying to give confidence to some of those iwi, hapu and Māori land trusts to come forward and talk with us. A lot of the land is cross between us and Western Bay. So a lot of the work that we're doing is sub-regional through smart growth. We're currently identifying barriers to progress and looking for ways to unlock the development in a way, as we've heard right through today, that suits the owners, that meets their own aspirations. So current projects underway, TPK mentioned the Kāinga Tupu, which looks right across the spectrum of housing need, and that's going extremely well, and we've continued to support that on a permanent basis with staffing and more specific supports. Our development contributions fund, we set aside $500,000 each year for over 3 years for both community housing and papakainga. We've just signed off the policies to distribute that, and working with the two groups, they have slightly different aspirations, so we've ended up with specific policies for each group. Whether that will be enough money, it's $250,000 each. Whether that will be enough money for them, we'll review that at the end of the first year to see what the pipeline's looking like, and we may end up adding into that. We have had in the past a toolkit to that it was available to trusts who are looking to develop papakainga. We've just paused that at the moment while the stock take's happening to reassess whether we need to update that toolkit. We've had a number of trusts that have gone through that and gone on to develop land, but we've had a number that haven't then progressed. So we just want to make sure that that's fit for purpose. And so I was very pleased to hear earlier on from Kāinga Ora that they have some technical expertise available, because that's a common cry that we get from not so much land trusts, but certainly from hapu, that they simply don't have the capability to put a deal together and bring it through the council processes. So look, all of that is not going to result in thousands of houses over the next 12 to 24 months, but we're certainly working very hard to unlock as much land as we possibly can.
Thank you very much. That sounds excellent. Can I move to Taupo, to Mayor David, just to get a feel for anything that's happening in there, particularly on Māori-owned land?
I think, Judy, it's Gareth here. I think Mayor David's had to just pop out for a second, so I'll jump in if that's okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, housing, I guess Taupo has only just really realised that housing's a major issue for us in the last couple of years, and that's both council and Tūwhare Toa. So both of us are working together. Tūwhare Toa, through their settlement agencies, have a housing strategy, and as part of that are actively purchasing development opportunities and developing those, and we're working with them for everything that we can do around our regulatory response and development contributions and the like. It's a significant opportunity for us, the use of multiply owned Māori land in our district. I think it's about 75% of our land is multiply owned Māori land, so a real opportunity for us to solve some of our larger housing issues with Tūwhare Toa, and as I say, they're in place now that they're keen and interested to do that. So Yeah, so a lot of work going on around Papakainga, around zoning of rural land, rezoning that to be residential. Like everybody else, a lot of work around substandard housing on multiply owned Māori land, which has popped up, and we've noticed a huge increase in that post-COVID, with people returning home and living in and constructing houses which are unconsented and not safe. So yeah, just like everybody, I guess, just putting a whole lot of energy into that space and trying to do the best that we can with the tools that we've got.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Chairman Leader, did you want to, just in terms of spatial planning and the work that that the Regional Council are doing, do you want to make any comment on feedback you're getting from Māori land ownership teams, just what's happening there?
Not really, Judy, apart from encouraging the local authorities to continue the manner in which you are. And the major interest we've got is the offset compliance in terms of some of those Papakainga developments. But you know, it's not core business.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Well, just for me to finish off, I don't think I've missed anybody out. We're in an interesting situation where not just within our Māori population, but in general, we're experiencing growth, and growth that is not well supported currently by a proper housing stock. But at an iwi level, we have some amazing plans that are being put up and designed right now. Tūhoe are looking at a range of what they're calling eco-villages around their rohi, which are pretty exciting development. I think it's already been mentioned about the Waimanakaku, who have got doing some work with Te Puna Kōkiri, Ngāti Awa. Definitely, you know, well, I think what's happened for all of us is that now that growth is suddenly our reality, it's changing some of our plans. And what I'm aware of with iwi is that in their development plans, housing is kind of coming back up the list again. Our district plan our current district plan was designed to be enabling for Papakainga development. And we've got some like out at Te Teko, there's a marae there with a plan for 43 new houses. I think they've got 4 or 5 up already, and the infrastructure in place for that development that was supported by the government several years ago. We have Ngāti Manawa, who we've met with just recently, who've got some really interesting ideas that isn't just about housing, but about placemaking around Murupara. Ngāti Rangatihi, they've just recently settled, and so I haven't heard any specific things from them, but I guess as they come to terms with their settlement and their aspirations, I'm sure housing will be in there. And of course, one of the things that we can do as a council to help that is we need to get their reticulated wastewater system in place to better facilitate housing development in every sense, but it will clearly have an impact on their ability to do so as well. Ngāti Whare Minganui was mentioned as well. They have been focused up till recently on employment and have done an amazing job in terms of creating jobs at their nursery for people, but they certainly have some really big challenges around housing in that village there, and so really good to hear about the work that's happening with them. We also, I guess like everybody, iwi have been experiencing a return to home through COVID, and that of course is, you know, increased substantially the need for housing to be a priority for them and their projects. So we're in a very similar space to the rest of you, where we see it as a huge priority, and we need to be doing all we can as a council to facilitate the aspirations of iwi around infrastructure and development. I think our district plan is enabling, but we need to again even recheck that we have got that right, and that we are providing a real green light for them to approach us and get on with what they want to have happen. Anybody else that wants to question or talk about that particular subject? Oh, it's Mayor Campbell. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you out. Sorry.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, look, with our situation, of course, we're doing the ones at the council, our projects with 31 houses in the Bone Street area where the central school used to be, 29 senior duplexes in next to Mountain View. But the biggest issue, well, it's not an issue, but I think it's a very great, a good chance to do some real development, is because we're actually landlocked by our local iwi, Tūwharetoa, And I'm just going to ask Faylene to step in here if I can, because she is on that settlement trust, and I think she has some interesting prospects in the pipeline.
Kia ora koutou, Faylene Tūnui, daughter of Tū Wharetoa, Ngai Tūhoi and Te Rarawa, and proud Deputy Mayor of Tauranga District Council. Just want to mihi to everyone for all their presentations today, and maybe just signal to all the partners who have given presentations. We would welcome the Kurutao team, the Maihi team, any team actually to come into our community with a makeup of 62% Māori. It would be great. I understand that you do have offices. However, for some of the situations that have been described earlier, it would be great to have that presence coming into our community to be able to connect. In the case of our iwi, just want to share that actually we have had to purchase the land back. So being very clear, there's a misconception in some spaces that this land has been given back to Māori or given back to iwi. In some cases, iwi have had to purchase that land back. That significantly reduces your resources to be able to do the infrastructure and the build. So to partner with these types of programs would be really exciting for our communities. If I can mihi to Mia Lynn, who spoke about individual general landowners and also to multiple landowners. If Kāinga Ora and Te Puni Kōkiri have come up with ways to be able to help those types of land ownership arrangements, it would be really great to get that help. So thank you.
Can I just make one other comment too, please, Chair? Tūwharetoa is Tūwharetoa Ki Kaora, not Tūwharetoa Taupo. So I just want to make sure that everybody is quite well aware of that, because we have had a lot of frustration in the past, particularly with treaty settlement homes and having to go through the whole CNI drama, and it has been very, very frustrating.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity, Mayor Campbell. That's fantastic. I think we've covered all the mayors. Can I now move to 5.6, which is the BOPLAS summary of the LTP projects to be delivered across the region over the next 10 years. And we've got Stephen Boyle from BOPLAS and Bevan Gray from Whakatane District Council. I can't see Stephen anywhere. Is he here? No, just Bevan. Go for it, Bevan.
Kia ora koutou. I think Stephen is joining shortly, but I'll give a bit of an update. So in 2018 to 28 LTPs, we undertook some analysis around combining all of the capital works projects across all of the Bay of Plenty or BOPLAS councils, just to get an understanding of what level of capital works we're going to hit the market. So a number of us had already signalled that through tendering processes that we were coming across some constraints. In some cases, only we would receive one tender, and it would be significantly higher than our engineering estimates. So together we pulled all of the information across the 2018 to 28 LTPs, took that to BOPLAS to provide a picture of what was happening in the region over that 10-year timeframe, and we've undertaken the same process this time around with the 21 to 31 LTPs. I'll just share my screen, which has a bit of a visual of that. Can everyone see that? So I guess at a high level, the purpose is to provide a visual output of all of our combined LTP capital projects across the region. And I talked a bit about the rationale around why we do it. And I guess it's just to, in simple terms, to understand the quantum of the works and to forecast whether there's going to be any constraints within our local contractor markets to deliver on these capital projects. Those constraints already existed in the last LTP. And to a certain extent, they're still going to exist now. As a bit of context, the last LTP, we only projected $4.3 billion worth of capex over the 10-year time frame. This has increased by 76, close to 80%, where we now have a projected capex budget of $7.6 billion. across the Bay of Plenty region from all of the councils. I've also brought in Waka Kotahi State Highway program into there as well. I guess the question for this forum and BotPlas is, what can we do to mitigate those risks? What can we do to try and reduce some of those constraints? Can we use this information to provide visibility to our contracting market, to encourage growth and reinvestment within those organizations, into people, into processes, into equipment, so that they can grow to meet our demands? And there's options, to connect this through to social procurement outcomes. So I've talked a little bit at a whakatane level with our local civil construction market contractors, and what they need is visibility, certainty, and timing around capital works and when they're going to hit, so that they can have some confidence in making those investments within their organization. I see this tool as providing some of that certainty and visibility around what works is going to hit the market in the next 10 years. As per normal councils, we tend to heavily load our first 3 to 4 years. So there's a lot there. And when we come to undertaking the next LTP, those following 3 years are going to be significantly higher again as well. So when you think about visibility to our contracting market, we're thinking about not only the contractors that do the works, we're also thinking about our consultants. So each of these projects in here has an element of scope, design, then it goes to tender, and then it gets into the delivery phase. If we can create some visibility around each of those tranches, we can provide certainty and investment in our local sector. So this dashboard is ability to dig into detail. So at a high level, this is everything, but you can click on individual councils and drill down to the LTP projects. So this is Whakatane District Council, for example. The projects we've got over the next 10 years, where they are in terms of location, and a breakdown of the next 3 years. So with LTPs, we need to be quite certain around the first 3 years of the LTP. So those are reasonably well defined. We've got a lot in construction and earthworks, a lot in roading, a lot of investment in Three Waters, probably similar to a lot of the other councils in the area. So you can also drill down at a higher level to look at all the construction and earthworks projects across all of the region, where they are, and the quantum of those too. So it's quite intuitive in terms of what information it provides and how you can use it. So across close to 2 billion across the 10-year time frame for construction and earthworks. Roading, 3.5 billion across 10 years. And you can see geographically on a map where that is. Don't worry about the dot out in the middle of the ocean. We're not building roads on Whakaari. That's unfortunately the Waka Kotahi budget, and they haven't indicated any area for that in the location. So that's just where the map sticks, Bay of Plenty. So I've built it to be reasonably user-friendly in terms of digging down into the information at an individual council level, an activity level, at a area or location level, or even at a what's happening in a particular year. One thing I did do but didn't bring into this map is a PGF layer which sits on top. So Stephen managed to get all of the projects that have gone through PGF, and we've pulled that into the dashboard, but what it doesn't provide is the year that those projects are going to be started and when they're going to be delivered. But it's really useful in terms of putting alongside the projects that we're delivering. These projects are also going to have a draw on our local contractor and consultant market. So Northland, you've got $806 million worth of PGF projects. They have plenty, $600 million worth of PGF projects, and it cascades down through to 8 million approved for Chatham Islands. So I think it was useful just to have a bit of context around the level of work going on, not only in the region, but in the country, and potentially where some of our consulting and contracting supply will be drawn to. That probably covers off most of it. I think I want to just at a high level provide you what we've put together, and get a feel from the group or the forum around how do we use this. Is there a concern around constraints, and what is the next steps in terms of utilizing this information, but how do we mitigate some of those constraints or risks for our contractors? So I open the floor to questions. I'm not too sure if Stephen's online yet and wants to provide a bit more context, but I'll leave the chart up if anyone has any questions in relation to it.
Yes, Mayor Chadwick does.
I've just simply got a question about, was this done, BOPLAS, in conjunction with the CEOs? I saw the targets that came out, and they did confuse us about, here we are focusing on housing and then infrastructure requirements around housing. What was BOPLAS's response to how we deal with this information? Valuable, but at a local level, were you thinking of flexible contracting? Because I don't know how you can achieve it. So what are you going to do with this information? That's all. Just confused.
So and we probably went through the same questions when it was presented in 2018. I don't think this should be used to try and move projects or contracts or try and create alignment or anything like that. I think this should purely be used to attract more consultants to either the region or the country, or provide certainty for our local contractors to reinvest and grow.
Is it linked to the economic development agencies that are working on specialist workforce with MB, and or is it just really good data, but what are you wanting a direction from the mayors to do with it?
I guess I don't know. So it's an issue. It's been identified as a problem. My thoughts are that we use it to attract and provide confidence for investment, but those were my thoughts only. So I don't know what the direction I'm seeking, I guess, is there a part for BOPLAS to play here? Is there a part for Toi EDA or the economic development agencies to play here? And what does the Mayoral Forum want to use this information for?
Okay, so Judy, through you as the chair, I'd like to see this data given to each economic development agency, just for them to chew around to see is it in alignment with their economic development aspirations, as well as the partnerships that they've got with us about some of our targets for housing. And then is there any sort of threads that could be joined up regionally, and what are they?
Okay, Stephanie O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Judy. And good questions from Mayor Chadwick there. I just wanted to acknowledge Bevan for the work that he's put into pulling all of this information together, which is no mean feat, but to get all of the LTPs plus the other pieces of work. I guess from our perspective, it was just to give the mayors and chairs a heads up about the scale and scope of the activity and to pull it together into a meaningful format. One of the ways which we are working on in the Eastern Bay to use this information, Mayor Chadwick, is with our Civil Contractors Forum, for example, and our Economic Development Agency, TOIDA, is part of facilitating that. And what we're trying to do is give our civil contractors a much greater level of transparency and forward look into our work program so that they can look to invest in their people and their assets and their companies with certainty as to what that work program is going to look like, as opposed to sort of an annual or even less way of working. And some of you are already there and doing that with your different contracting arms and different contracting communities. But for us, that sort of, we've been looking at the Gisborne model and working towards developing a much stronger procurement process and social procurement drivers, so that we look to build our communities, our economies, and get better environmental outcomes from this too. And I guess because if I use examples like Fulton Hogan or even Waiotahi or Crossroads, I know they're working across many of our areas. And so in having them in the room and being able to share this, whether they're roading or Three Waters contracts, it allows us to work together in a much stronger partnership to be able to have confidence in the delivery of these CapEx budgets, which is always, you know, the conundrum for us all. So I guess it was, from my perspective anyway, I don't speak for my colleagues, to share this with mayors and chairs and to show that this is a piece of work that we're going to have to consistently work at to get different procurement models, different contracting models underway to be able to enable us to do this work, because it's growing, it's getting bigger and bigger and more of a challenge. And we're, you know, most of our contracting fraternity is quite small, mum and dad owned companies, all sorts of challenges. So this enables us to package that up, and potentially what we'd like to think is maybe there are opportunities to talk to central government about ways they can support us more effectively to enable this budget to be expedited as well. So could I, thanks Steph, that sort of helps with Bevan's data to see where you're coming from. I wonder if one of the biggest opportunities for us, and it's a bit of what we heard about this morning with Mahi, TPK, it's certainly about growing our workforce capability, engineers, you know, technical jobs, civil engineers, those sort of skills within our own region, and the opportunity for apprenticeships through our economic development arms, I think is really rich for us. So it's about growing our own, and in that pipeline, it's a bit of the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs too, and then getting them to work alongside Fulton Hogan, Heb, all these other, you know, construction agencies, so that we do grow our capability. And there's also a lot of that coming back into the country now that we're not really using. So a lot of our people coming home are looking for jobs there too. So I like the aspiration. It's just how we give it a bit of grunt,
Yeah.
I agree with you, Mayor Chair. For me, it gives a degree of realism to our long-term plan. If it's not achievable because we're short of the labour force and contractors, then it makes a mockery of those LTPs. So I'm really grateful for what I've seen on those charts. And Stephen, I see that you're here now, and I've also noticed that Aileen Lowry would like to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment that part of this work arose out of our concerns around the harbour development. We went out to the market a few years ago, worried about whether there was sufficient rock source close enough to actually build a harbour with. And so I think one of the other aspects of this is actually the natural material supply side. So whether it's gravel, whether it's rock, whether it's concrete, all of those things you actually need to actually pull off these projects. And for us, what it resulted in putting the demand information out actually resulted in two quarries upscaling and a new quarry coming into existence. So you have to do that with sufficient lead-in time. So just encourage us all just to think about the natural material supply as well.
Thank you, Aileen. That's a really good point. Stephen, did you have anything you wanted to add to the discussion?
No, I didn't, and apologies for arriving a couple of minutes late. I didn't realise you were running ahead of time. But the intention is to take this back to the CE Forum and continue to explore those opportunities anyway, and those points that Bevan touched on are very, very relevant. And I also just want to acknowledge again the contribution Bevan and Whakatane District Council have had to pulling this data together, because it's very, very helpful data to have moving forward.
Thank you very much. That's great. Aileen, did you have another question? No, just the hand still up, that's right. Okay, well, look, moving on now. Thank you very much, guys. We're going to move on to Whakatane District Council Climate Change Action Plan. And this work has been led by our Strategy and Policy Committee, which is a committee of the whole council, led by Councillor Nandor Tanchos. So I've asked him to make a presentation to you all on where we've arrived. So where is he, Nandor? I'll ask you to come on. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa, ngā koro mātua, ngā manukura o te Wairiki, nā reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. It's a great pleasure and honour to present the Whakatane District Council climate change, what we've been doing in the area of climate change. And I should say at the start that I'm not a kind of technical expert, so I won't be giving you a lot of graphs and numbers. I personally find those a bit dull, actually. I'm much more interested in how do we gain momentum for this kind of work. And so I thought I'd talk to you maybe a bit more of the human dynamics that shaped our journey. If you do want those kind of figures and numbers and that kind of technical stuff, it's all at our website, or our staff are very happy, very eager to work with other councils on developing this work. So please do put your hand up for that. So to start off, I'll just say that prior to 2016, if you looked at the Whakatane District Council website, you wouldn't really have seen anything about climate change. If you'd done a search, you would have turned up some references in the back of a planning document somewhere, but there was no evidence that council as an organisation really understood the implications of climate change, or that it was thinking strategically about how to either reduce its own emissions, local emissions, or how to adapt to the climatic and ecosystem changes that are already baked in as a result of where we are today. And the problem, frankly, was a political one. There were a number of staff who were interested in the issue. There's a good base of knowledge and skills, but there was a lack of understanding or will at the political level. And staff had even developed a sustainability strategy of their own back, but it kind of hadn't gone anywhere. So in my view, Whakatane District Council's journey with climate change, more than anything, is a story of unleashing talented staff on a challenging problem, actually giving them the mandate to do the work that they want to do. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Hang on, how do I do this? Share my screen, here we go. See that, eh?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, so The journey began almost informally. We had a steering group that was set up as a result of kind of agitation for some action on climate change. And it had a bit of a hazy mandate. There was some senior staff from tier 2 or 3 who put their hands up, and I was invited to chair it. We brought in people from across the organisation, and one of the features of our work has been recognising that it's a whole of council thing, and that all of our business activities have a part to play in the climate change transformation. And we also had a project group that allowed staff at a lower level to kind of input as well, so everyone had a chance to be involved who wished to. We spent a bit of time trying to define our understanding of the issue and build a shared understanding, because one of the difficulties with climate change is the high levels of uncertainty. We know that we're warming the planet. We understand in broad terms what that means, but we don't clearly know where all those tipping points are, or exactly at a very local level what the implications are going to be. And I really think that one of the responsibilities of civic organisations like ours is to help our communities better understand what the local effects are going to be, so they can start making better decisions for themselves. So because of that uncertainty, we have to take an adaptive approach. They talk about dynamic adaptive pathways, where we make decisions that leave options open for the future. So with that in mind, we decided we better start developing some principles to inform our decision making. And again, because of the lack of political leadership in Wellington at that time, local government in New Zealand was picking up the slack. And so we had the Mayoral Declaration on Climate Change, which our then Mayor Tony Bond signed, and I'm sure a number of you signed as well. And that was really helpful in starting to articulate some of the principles that were important. The other influential thing for us in Whakatane was we had the Edgecombe Floods. And I think that really sharpened people's thinking around what climate change might mean for a district like ours, which is generally low-lying, at risk of sea level rise and inundation, large areas of flood-prone land, protected by stop banks. And that's without even mentioning kind of the fire risk from our very large areas of pine plantation. And I think that's something that we need to put our minds to a bit more. So we joined to the CMARS program. Where we go here? We joined to the CMARS program, which is now known as TOI2, and that helps us understand what our carbon emissions were in our district. As you can see, almost half of our organisational emissions are wastewater treatment, methane from wastewater treatment. And that's a very difficult problem to solve, because of course you need significant infrastructural investment to transform that. So, so that's really huge. If you go, so that's something we have to work on with a bit of a longer term view. But if you look at the other further down, electricity is very significant. And a lot of that is in our pumps and water services. And then also natural gas, which is around some of our heating, and then our transport emissions from diesel and petrol. So kind of out of understanding these things, we developed a set of climate change principles. And so those were, we will act now. And so this included some commitments to making emissions reductions, to showing leadership, and to change how we operate as a community, as an organisation. We said we will protect and care for the environment. So again, some specific commitments around transport emissions, resource use, procurement, biodiversity, and circular economies. We said we'll acknowledge those most affected, recognising that often it's poor communities who bear the biggest brunt of climate change, and often they've made the least contribution. So we have to acknowledge there's significant equity issues in there. We will think long term, because often climate change projections stop at an arbitrary number, 2050 or 2100, but climate change continues, the cumulative impacts continue to grow. We said we will learn, we recognise different knowledge bases, including positivist science, Tauranga Māori, and local knowledge, and we have to stay abreast. And we've made significant investment in our, in both our staff and our councillors at making sure that we all have a base level of understanding about what climate change means, but we've also invested in specific advanced training and education for those who have an interest in that. And we've said we will be part of the solution, which is around working cooperatively with stakeholders in our communities, with other local authorities, and at a national and international level. So we took these climate change principles to our council, which signed them off for consultation. we engaged quite deeply in our community, and we weren't just interested in feedback on the principles, but we wanted to know, what do people understand about climate change? Where did they get their information from? What were the information sources that they trusted? Because part of our work has to be about increasing understanding in our community. And it was interesting because we found there was a significant but small minority of our communities who were still locked into a kind of conspiratorial climate change denialism mindset. But actually the overwhelming response was, in our communities, people wanted change, they wanted movement. And in fact, the message that we got was to be stronger in our approach. So this term of council, the Strategy and Policy Committee, as Mayor Judy has said, has been given a specific delegation around climate change. And we've developed a set of strategies, targets, and action plans. So this is how it cascades. We've got our climate change principles, we've got our strategy, and then we've got 6 kind of action plans that come out of that, which recognise the most significant contributors to climate change emissions in our organisation and in our community, and also areas where we need to make adaptation. So leadership and collaboration, and our leadership is so significant in our community because there's no other organisation which has the mandate and the ability to show the kind of leadership that we all do as civic organisations. So transport action plan, so that's both about looking at our own transport fleet, and we've had some external advice about how do we start to transition to more hybrids and electrics, recognising that not all of our vehicles can change. In our roading team, for example, there are no hybrid or electric viable alternatives, so that will come. But for the meantime, we need to be realistic. But it's also about what is the infrastructure that we're embedding into our communities that kind of build independence on the internal combustion engine or give people active transport alternatives. We've got an energy action plan and an energy management policy that comes out from underneath that. And we've involved MSOL in a really comprehensive audit of our energy, looking at where our emissions, both our carbon and our energy. As I said, there's a lot of energy being used in our pumps and things like that. The interesting thing with that is that there's a lot of interest in solar photovoltaic, and the advantage with an organisation like ours is we use the energy as it's produced, so we don't need to invest in a lot of batteries and storage. But because we pay our energy is so cheap, what we pay for it, and a lot of New Zealand's energy is renewable anyway, some of the best benefits are in not very kind of sexy things like PV, but they're in really small, unseen kind of changes. That's where some of the real benefits are to be found. Our water services, I've already talked about the pumps, but also looking at how do we be more biophilic in our approach to how we look at things like stormwater and things like that. Waste and circular economies, and as you all will, we've got our waste minimisation and management and minimisation plan. And we've made a really strong commitment to being a circular, or trying to build a circular economy, recognising that it's limited what you can do at a local level. But it's greatly encouraging to see the government starting to pick up product stewardship, which has been in place in the Waste Minimisation Act for a long time now, but we're starting to actually see that being picked up and those levers being used. So that's great. And then also land use in the built environment in terms of land use practices, but also again how we build in high emission activity or not, and also how the way that we build buildings is so critical. And we have levers as councils, and we aren't making much use of those. So again, these have gone to our community for feedback, and again the general response has been people want us to be more ambitious. There's a real appetite for change in our community, and that's really encouraging. And just to say, in terms of that MSOL work that I was talking about, they've identified a whole suite of options for us with immediate carbon benefits, but the kind of economic benefits are really significant as well. Some of these things, you've got a return on investment. They pay for themselves within 5 or so years. And if you've got a 20% return on investment, who wouldn't invest in something like that if it both benefits the environment and then has these ongoing cost savings? So to me, some of the stuff is I just don't understand why those investments haven't been made in the past. One of the other things I think is that we listen to our community, because there's enormous expertise in our community. For example, one general manager was really keen on solar for our swimming pool for the heating. And so kind of built a project around that. And it took a sharp-eyed enthusiast in our community to recognize that actually this was going to increase emissions because the solar panels were least productive when we needed the heat the most in winter. And so they really relied quite heavily on gas backup. And kind of this was not really noticed, but actually took someone in the community to recognize and make some recommendations that a better solution would be energy efficient heat pumps. And so we listened to that and had big benefits. And I think all of us, we do all have enormous expertise and enthusiasm in our communities. And I think we really need to listen to that, because sometimes it's very easy to kind of not pay attention because we've just got our minds on business as usual. And in fact, our swimming pool has been the real star of our organisation. The manager of our swimming pools has really taken on board that suite of recommendations from MSOL, implemented a series of changes and made some really significant carbon emission reductions from our swimming pools. In the first 12 months, 114 tonnes of carbon reduced from our swimming pools. That's really quite stunning. I've mentioned our fleet management. As I said before, I think the key to our program has been the whole of council approach. There's been really clear and strong political leadership from our Mayor Judy Turner, from our councillors who are all really behind this. Our CE has given strong support and strong mandate to staff, and then working with people across the organisation who have the passion. And there's loads of that in our organisation. And I just think it's extraordinary what staff at all levels of the organisation will bring to the table when we give them the chance. That's an enormous potential for us all. And this approach has led to us winning the Trust Horizons Business Award, inaugural award for sustainability this year. And I was told by one of the judges that they were really impressed at the comprehensive and detailed approach taken by our council. And again, for me, it's a real tribute to our staff, how everyone has taken this on board and really worked together collaboratively across the organisation. I think our next big challenge is really how we begin to lead broad change across our community. I don't think there's much value in trying to convince people who don't want to change, but I think there's a lot of people in our community who want to change, who recognise the critical need for transformation, and they're not quite sure how to go about it. So I think if we can help people to identify their options, then I think that's probably the most useful thing we can do immediately. Because people do understand a transformation is needed, that we can't continue doing what we've been doing. And I think that COVID has really brought that to people's minds as well. It's helped us to understand that we need to change how we do things. As civic leaders, we are in a unique position to be a catalyst for that change. I know a number of you are doing that work already. So I just want to acknowledge that the work that's being done by all the organisations at this forum and a number of you, and encourage us all to not to lose steam, to continue, because this is such critical work, and we have an enormous ability to make change. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Judy, for allowing me the opportunity to be here. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Nandor?
Oh, can I put my hand up?
Yes, go for it.
Nandor, lovely to see you. And the next step, I totally agree with you, is how you get it out into the community awareness from within out. And I went to Minister Shaw launching the Te Arawa Climate Change Action Plan here at Sion. Man, that was impressive, with that Tauranga Māori lens over our own climate change plan. So we're now having to say, okay, if that's the Te Arawa's aspirations, we need to look at our climate change action plan and see where we work together, more joined up. And I think that's where we're all going to end up going, but it's fabulous you've got it. And I think you've all got some gurus in each TLA and regional council. And when we join them up, I think the whole region will start to think quite differently and could lead the way. But great.
Thank you, Mayor Chadwick, and yeah, thank you, Nandor. And no, none of you can have him. He's ours, all right? So,
Could I just respond to Steve's? And first of all, it's lovely to see you, Steve. It's been a long time, and it's always a pleasure to see you. I want to acknowledge the work that your council's done in terms of building relationship with the Mana Whenua, because I think you're an inspiration to us all and an example of how at least one way to go about it. And I think you're absolutely right. We have to start to build a shared vision of where we're trying to go across all of our communities. If we do that, we can do extraordinary things. But if we're divided, we can do nothing. So building those relationships is absolutely critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandor. And just a nice follow on from that now is to hear from Bay of Plenty regional climate change people who are going to give us an update. I think it is Sarah that's going to speak to us.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Turner. Kia ora tātou. Fiona sends her apologies. She's got a couple of weeks of well-deserved leave. I know that she has previously presented the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's action plan. So this is just a quick update, and I'm mindful that you've still got the big RMA discussion coming up. So I'll go through it quickly. Not a presentation, just wanted to update on three key things. One is a regional risk assessment that's underway. Another is on the regional carbon footprint that's being updated, and then just some of the collaborative projects which touches on the previous discussion. So just we do have that region-wide risk assessment in train. We've contracted Tonkin and Taylor to get that done. All of the councils are working together on that. So we have a working group established. So everyone's connected into it. It's going to be a two-part piece of work. First is about the risk assessment itself, the risk identification, and the screening of those risks. And then will be the assessment of the risk. And it'll give a regional picture, but across each of the districts. And so everybody will be doing, in varying degrees, their own assessment to feed up into that overall picture. There's been some talk about how adaptation fits into that, and we see this as, let's do the risk identification and then the assessment, and that conversation about adaptation should follow. And just touching on that, we do have an adaptation community and hapu-led project funding available that's been made through our LTP for the next 3 years. That's open now. And we've got some really good projects coming forward. So Fiona would be really keen to present on that once the applications for that has closed, and to get a picture of what they're looking like. But yeah, exciting projects coming through from the community and hapu. In terms of the carbon footprint work, you'll know that that was last done in 2015. So it's definitely time to update that for the footprint across the Bay of Plenty. We have gone back, and you'll be aware that we've gone back 3 years to get kind of a pre-COVID as well as a post-COVID understanding of the carbon footprint. And that's been a little bit more costly than we had anticipated it to be, but thank you to the councils that are contributing to that funding. And Rotorua, you had already done your district footprint before we started up that work, and so that's going to feed really nicely into that overall footprint. The format will follow the previous report, so that what you saw in 2015, but we will be including Taupō this time. But what you'll see is pretty much what we saw last time, with a more focus on transport emissions as well, because that's changed. And we know that that's the key area where reductions are going to be required. That should be looking at an estimate of the different vehicle types right across the region, and how that's different in the different sub-regions as well. And just finally, we've got some really neat collaborative projects underway that hopefully you're all aware of, but just some updates. We're looking at, there's that great website FutureFit that enables individuals as well as agencies to better understand carbon footprint and get suggestions for improvements. We are negotiating a regional subscription to roll that out across all TAs. We've got the Climate Future exhibition booked in 2022 with MFE for Tauranga, Whakatane and Rotorua, which will be really exciting. You'll know that the government released yesterday the consultation document for the emissions reduction plan, and we're really hoping we can do a combined submission on that one back to government. Your staff will be looking at what it means and what the key points for commentary will be, just as our, but it'll be great if we could connect on that and have a shared submission. We are hopefully through the CDM joint committee, you'll be aware that the Lifelines Regional Risk Assessment report is also being published, and that's a really good insight into how our lifelines will be, are and will be impacted by climate change and the kinds of mitigations we have to put in place to keep communities safe. And finally, just a note that our staff across all the TAs and the Regional Council are working together and meeting regularly to discuss, the collective action plans and what we're doing, both as organisations, but across communities as well. So hopefully that was just a quick snapshot. And any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Sorry, Mayor Chadwick.
I just wanted to say we got great credibility and traction yesterday when Regional Council came and sat with our Infrastructure and Environment Deputy CE around floodwater modelling, and it made us rethink not just the Regional Council modelling, it reinforced what we've been saying about the management of stormwater and where we look at infrastructure like parks and open spaces. And it was a very powerful combination having them sit together, and it's making us review again those sort of outdoor spaces. And it raised the discussion around sustainability of outdoor stadiums, horse racing, some of the Sport Bay of Plenty stuff. And it was just great to see, would you really put it in a floodplain that you might need to use for pooling and retention of water, stormwater. So thanks for that, Doug. And it helped, but I think it raises a wider discussion of mayors of the region about, how many of these things can we sustain in terms of regional facilities, and where can we put them? Yeah, so it was great. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Chadwick. And also thank you to Sarah for that presentation. I don't see any other requests for questions too, so I'm going to move on. We're now going to go back to item 5.7, and I had put up this proposal for our agenda, which was based on the fact that when I was down in one of our Taupo meetings with the Three Waters, a couple of people made sort of aside comments during making speeches that sort of stuck in my mind, where they basically understood how concerned we were about the Three Waters reform, but challenged us to consider that we became too distracted with that and failed to see some of the things coming our way through the RMA. We may get a big rude shock. And it certainly motivated me to go back and pick up the papers I did have on my desk and reread and be a bit more thorough about it. And so really all I wanted to do was to perhaps invite a discussion where we talk particularly about the RMA, but the reforms in general. I mean, our council have already put up a submission, like the rest of you, on the Three Waters, and I have to say I've never been more proud of a submission that we've put up as I was about that one, considering the time constraints we all had to get that done by, and the fact that it was a moving feast in terms of the information that we had in front of us. I was pretty proud of what we ended up with. But now we need to start to respond to the Minister as she responds to us, and look at the RMA and local government reforms. So I'm going to start with Mayor Campbell, because I nearly left him off the list last time. But I just wondered, what are you guys feeling? I sent out those 3 questions to guide our discussion around what are you developing as an organisational response? Have you had any briefings with your councillors? And do you see any value in some more regional or sub-regional discussions and events to align our thinking? So I'll start with you, Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. And look, to be honest, not a lot at this point in time. And in fact, it just happens to coincide with the fact we're going to have a workshop next Tuesday to get our council on board with this. So I can't really add too much to it at all, to be honest. But it's just it's just work in progress for us, and this is the next step of what we're going to do.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Chadwick. What's happening in your space with particularly the RMA and maybe even the local government reforms?
Yeah, we've only had a briefing on it, and I was very pleased to see yesterday a letter from the Minister about the appointment of the RMA committee, and some great people on it. So, that gives us a level of comfort in this region about the capability that's gone forward on that. I think, Judy, when they have formed it's like your 3 questions, they will come back to us about, what do you think the 3 key areas are? For us, it's about more nimble responses to housing and how we can be helped by that. But there's a lot more work to do there. We have been totally bogged down about our housing crisis. So the RMA falls out of that. I'm pleased about the committee. I think they'll guide us about what sort of responses they need. I just caution from the working party on the Three Waters. I don't know, we might be able to reach broad consensus that these are the top issues for us in this region, but they'll be quite different at a local level. But good on you starting that poking, Judy. We'll put it back to a committee.
That's okay. Lynn Riestra, did you have any, where's your council at regarding the other reforms?
I'll ask Aileen to say a little bit on this, and seeing as how she has been appointed to the steering committee.
Yes, that good idea. Thank you, Mayor Riestra. Where's she? Is she here?
Yeah. Yes.
How's
it? Can you hear me?
Throwing you under the bus there, Aileen. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. That's all good. So, yeah, look, it's pretty bit of an honour really to be appointed to the RM steering group. The letter came out, I think, yesterday, and I saw it appeared in one of the LGNZ notices. So I'm still not entirely clear about whether it's public or not, but it seems to be sufficiently out that it is at least semi-public. So the group has been meeting, and I was part of the CE's group prior to this group being formed, and also the Taituara group that put together the submission on the Natural and Built Environments Act. So the RM system review actually started in 2009, and in 2020 we had a 530-page report delivered that was chaired by Judge Randerson, and that's effectively the blueprint for the reforms. So that definitely is flowing through, and the officials are turning that into legislation as we speak. So the Natural and Built Environments Act was the first piece that we saw, and we saw that a couple of months ago, and it very much follows that blueprint. The LGNZ special interest groups are all over it, as is the Taituara reference group for the reforms that I'm chairing. That's all really technical, and I have to say that there's some huge issues down in the technical parts of how this is going to work. But from a governance perspective, I think probably the big thing is the move from effects-based legislation to an outcomes-based legislation. So that implies a lot more prescription about what's going to be in it and how our resource management regime is going to behave into the future. And the other key point that I see is about the decision-making is definitely moving away from local and definitely moving towards a regional level, whether that's like a land transport committee type approach, or whether in fact that goes out to independent appointees to make decisions. I don't know, but those are probably the two big issues for governance to be thinking about at this stage. We've got 3 acts coming. So we've seen the front half of the Natural and Built Environments Act, and we'll see the rest of that. We'll see report back out of the Environment Committee probably before Christmas, and we'll see that in the Strategic Planning Act sometime next year for submission. The same themes come through around moving that decision making to a more regional or even more remote place. What else can I say? The steering group, we're meeting weekly at least, and the material's coming thick and fast, very fast in fact, and they intend to engage with the sector during November. And I know they've been in touch with the Regional Council in terms of getting some appointments in for the Mayoral Forum to be engaged, and I guess we'll hear more about that in the next week or so. Having spent a career in resource management, I can say that I think these reforms are really far-reaching. They're going to change our organisations as we know them. They're going to change our structures, the way we resource planning and the way we think about planning. For our community, it's going to change all the understanding they have about how the RMA currently works. The language around it, I think, is going to change, and people's expectations of rights to be heard and all of those kinds of things. All of that's going to change. The way we collect our data and the way we feed our data into processes and the way our IT works around it and the way our central government agencies engage in the regions, all of that I think is up for change. So pretty significant, I think. And a lot of the devil is going to be in the detail, and I think a lot of potential unintended consequences, which is hopefully where our special interest groups and our reference groups can engage and point those out before we get too far down the track. But make no mistake, this is moving really fast, and it is a really significant change.
Thank you very much, Eileen. That's really
Does
helpful.
that help, Mayor Judy?
Yes, to a degree. I'd be interested in hearing from, say, Chairman Leader regarding, what's happening at the regional council level in terms of particularly governance, understanding, and engagement with the process.
Thanks, Judy. A couple of things. Firstly, I don't think you should apologise for putting it on the agenda. And those so-called side comments at Taupo weren't side comments. It was a flag to say, have you really thought about this? So full marks for putting it on the table. I agree with Aileen in terms of the gravity of these issues, and Aileen is right. You only have to look at the template from the Randerson report, which is essentially regional focus, regional activities. And if you ask me to make a comment in terms of which way the flock of birds is flying, it's flying towards the unitary type structure that you've got in Auckland. However, having been part of the NPS FM Freshwater, Aileen is going to find that this will consume her for the next 8 to 12 months because the detail and the outcomes are so important. Absolutely critical is the commitment to this because the timeline is defined. The Minister has said that he wants this signed off by Parliament in mid-22. Now, that's a lot of time for everybody to get their heads around it. And my concern is that whilst the sector is debating, arguing over the Three Waters issue, this whole issue of RMA reform is trucking along underneath it. And I don't see any appetite from the Parliament to actually extend the time frame in terms of this RMM reform. So that's the time frame you're working to. And the answer to your questions, Judy, from the Regional Council's perspective are yes, yes, and yes. She's gone.
Doug, why don't you ask if there's anyone else that wants to have their say?
Well, who hasn't had their say? Gary Weber?
Yeah. Early.
Oh, Anne? We'll do with Anne. Yep.
Okay, so look, we've had informal discussions that hasn't gone under our radar while we've been dealing with the Three Waters. I share Doug's concerns that it's been overwhelmed, I think, by local government. We are really concerned at the pace and the fact that the future of local government, which is the structures, you know, the form of local government is coming after the RMA changes, which, you know, nothing that Aileen said gives me any great comfort at the scale of change. Can I congratulate Aileen on being appointed to that? And it is of comfort for us to know that, you know, we have someone sitting at the table who understands the implications of that, significance of that change for the whole way that we operate local government. And the answer to your questions,
she's gone too.
Judy, is we haven't had a fault. I think I understand Stevie's concerns about all having local issues, but I think if we can get a concerted response or analysis of the reforms, it will be helpful down in Wellington. The more we can speak with the one voice, the more we're going to be listened to.
Yep.
Stephanie O'Sullivan is happy to provide.
Steph, do you want to make a comment?
Hi all. Yeah, just apologies from Judy. She's had IT issues at Murphy's Law, so she apologises. She's just getting back on. Just our update is similar to most of you. We've formed a bit of a team. It's still early days, but we've appointed a program manager to try and get integration between the three sets of reforms. And we've got a GM that's a sponsor for each of those areas. So we're just setting up that sort of reform program in a consistent way. The councillors have mostly had Three Waters briefings to date, but we're about to embark on a program in terms of trying to get ahead of the work that's coming with our governance group, rather than the kind of the reactive stuff that we found ourselves with Three Waters, and just watching what's coming through. And we thought it would be a good idea if we could just share key speakers in a regional forum about the reforms, whichever as they relate to whether it's future of local government or RMA or Three Waters in its future. And I think that there might be, you know, Judy was thinking about sharing those opportunities, sharing costs, but making it a sort of an aligned opportunity given the nature of what, as you say, Doug, about where this is going. So for us to have some shared opportunities to connect around this, and whether there's also opportunity for staff as well to do some analysis and thinking together, we're open to considering that, and always kind of have the door open to opportunities for regional responses when we were aligned on those issues as well. So that's our view, open minds, doing our best to get organised internally, and throw some resource at this as well so that we're on the front foot. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Steph. Sorry, I just, without warning, suddenly the whole screen died on me. I'm back on. Look, just a couple of things to add to what Steph said. When I looked at the exposure draft that was sent out, yes, it was very clear about some points that were intended for the Natural and Built Environments Bill, but what wasn't clear and what was signalled as some concerns by people was things like, what is the status of existing use rights, the status of existing consents that still have some life in them. There's a whole lot of questions that will have huge impact on our communities if indeed they are if indeed they are under threat. So there was a list of things where they kind of signalled some concerns that weren't signalled in that early exposure draft. I, like most of you, I think we all put into submission and on that exposure draft, but frankly, as far as I was concerned, there was a lot more that we didn't understand out of what was presented than what was in that exposure draft. And they'd signalled all those other matters that hadn't yet been decided. So, yeah, I just think we've got to understand the impact, not just on ourselves as an organisation in terms of where resource consenting lies at the end of the process, but actually some of our community who are reliant on the life of their consents to know that they are still safe, because that is, to me, was not clear in that exposure draft. And I'm really glad we've got Aileen as part of that, because I think we've got somebody close to home that would be able to keep us updated with those. And some of my fears may be unfounded, and I flipping well hope they are. But I'm very glad, Aileen, that you've accepted that role, and we'll be looking forward to some regular updates from the committee. But good to have you there that we can ask some direct questions to. So any other questions or comments about? I'm not sure where we got to. Did David get a chance to share from Taupo? Wasn't sure. No, lost him. Can you guys hear me? Oh, you can. That's good. That's all right. Just checking.
Never heard from John Holyoke.
Oh,
Holyoke's
John.
gone.
Yeah, where's John?
Oh no, he's gone.
He's gone too.
He's gone.
Yeah, no, he's gone too. I think we've probably heard from everybody. Oh, and we heard from Anne Tolley.
Yes.
Oh,
yep.
Good. Sorry. I apologise for that failure. That kind of brings us, I think, to today's meeting. And I think that this matter around the RMA reform and local government ones will be something that we may need to sort of have a regular catch up when we do meet together to get our understanding, because I think where there is strength is where we will find, with those issues we find agreement on. Not that we are required to be agreed on every point, but I know that particularly with the Three Waters, that on those matters where councils have been largely united on, I think we've had a powerful voice to put up to the Minister on those matters, and I think that will apply for the other reforms as well. So thank you for your attendance today. I don't think I can't see anybody else signalling they want to talk, but thank you very much. Thank you to Regional Council for hosting the Zoom meeting, and see you all next time.
Ka kite.